This all happened when I was around 18 years old. My brother was working as a security guard in an abandoned mall, and I decided to drive over to visit him during the night shift. The place was about 30 minutes from where we lived with my parents. I got there around 1 a.m. We were sitting in the old rundown office together, and I noticed that he didn't seem too concerned with the usual rules and etiquette of traditional workplaces. For instance, he was rolling a joint in the desk, and he had a PS2 hooked up to a small TV that he had brought from home. I asked if he was worried that his supervisor would come by. Wouldn't he get in trouble if he was caught smoking weed, or if I was seen hanging out with him during his shift? Not to mention the gaming system that he had hooked up. Dude, I don't give a crap about this job. And besides, the boss man's only comes by once in the past 3 months, and he stayed for about all of 5 minutes. They don't care about what I'm doing over here as long as I show up. He put his feet up on the desk and lit the joint right there in the office, tapping ashes all over the floor. I couldn't help but admire his courage and nihilistic mentality. He was 3 years older than me, and I wasn't used to taking such big risks in the workplace. But he had said that he didn't care about the job, so I decided to just roll with it. We played video games for a little while in the mildew-smelling office. A surveillance feed was hooked up to a TV in the corner, with a grainy video showing the outside of the building. It scrolled up and up endlessly, making me feel sick to my stomach every time that I looked at it. "What's with the survey camera? Can't you fix that?" "Meh," he said, shrugging his shoulders. I tried fiddling with the dials myself, but it just made things worse. In the end, I settled on leaving it roughly the same way that I had found it. After hanging out for a couple of hours, I started to yawn. Feeling sleepy and bored, I was about to stand up and say that I was heading home. And that was when Noel asked if I wanted to go with him on a patrol through the abandoned mall. It was 3 a.m. at this point, and I was tired, but I decided, hey, what the heck. I was off from school for the summer, so it wasn't like I had to wake up early in the morning. Plus, he made it sound pretty interesting. "Okay, sure, let's go. You got an extra flashlight?" "Oh, heck yeah, check this bad boy out." He handed me a huge black mag light, and then gave me a security jacket with his company's logo on it, a white knight and a steed holding a lance. "Just in case anybody runs into us, it'll make you look more official. There are homeless folks who get in here sometimes, and we gotta kick them out, so don't be surprised if you see somebody." "No way, for real?" "Yeah, it's only happened once or twice though." We left the office and proceeded into the large open space of the abandoned shopping mall. It had been shut down for years, and it was scheduled for demolition at some point in the indeterminate future. The place was massive, I realized as we got further in. Since the mall was in a neighboring town that I didn't visit often, I didn't know too much about it. Everything looked ancient though. It was like entering a ghost town where no one had visited for decades, and everything was perfectly preserved. "There's some really cool stuff on the lower level," Noel said. "Come on, I'll show you." And going past various shops and kiosks, I saw that everything had been left behind in many of the stores. Much of the merchandise still lined the shelves, covered in dust and grime. I saw bags of chips and candy bars, with retro-style lettering on them, with wrappers that I didn't recognize. Many of the stores were shuttered, but a few were open, and you could walk around inside if you so wished. How long has this place been closed up for? This stuff all looks ancient. I don't know, but it weirds me out too. Like, why the heck is this place still here? You'd think they would have done something with the property by now. I'm guessing this mall has been shuttered for decades. By the sounds of it, Noel didn't know much more about the building than I did, despite the fact that he worked there. It was dark, and I had to use my flashlight to see where I was going. I was beginning to feel a lot more frightened the further that we got. It reminded me of going urban exploring. This felt very similar to that rush, as we didn't know when there could be an unsavory character around the next corner at my time. Crackheads or squatters, you never know who you'd run into. What folks you would find making use of the dark, unseen spaces left hidden from the general populace. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I didn't want to admit that to my older brother. He was marching ahead as if this was all no big deal and didn't seem particularly worried. When we got to the stairs and went down to the lower level, there was a food court and even more shops down there. I stared in wonder at them all. It was amazing that the huge place and all the businesses there had closed, and I wonder how such a thing could have happened. Why'd this place shut down anyways? I don't know, man. When I ask the other guards who live around here, they treat me like I'm an idiot for questioning it. Like it's just the way that things are meant to be. It got to the point where I don't ask questions anymore. Over here, this is what I wanted to show you. He led me into an old computer store on the lower level. There were monitors and old hard drives everywhere. Random computer parts scattered the floors and lined the shelves. It looked like the place had been ransacked by people who had thrown things all over. Probably Noel, I had guessed. All the technology in the store looked dated and ancient though, worthless for any practical purposes. This is pretty cool, I've got to admit. Oh yeah, check this out, grab a monitor. We each picked up a computer monitor and I followed after him as he carried it out of the abandoned store. He led me a few doors over to another defunct and dilapidated establishment. No way, there's a bowling alley down there. Dang right there is. We entered the giant, echoing space and I saw that there were roughly a dozen lanes. A small snack bar and a shoe counter were over to our left, dusty and neglected looking. The racks still had bowling balls on them and I couldn't help but marvel once again at the ghost town quality of the place. I couldn't understand why nobody had taken the bowling balls or the shoes. Weren't those things worth some money? Even if it wasn't a lot, why didn't the owners want to recoup their losses and to sell off the remaining inventory? Noel took the computer monitor that he was carrying and he brought it out onto one of the lanes. He set it down carefully with the glass facing towards us and instructed me to do the same on the adjacent lane. This is what I like to do when I'm bored at night here, he said, grabbing a bowling ball from a nearby rack. I saw what he meant when I looked at the other lanes and saw the smashed computer consoles and monitors, the debris from repeated bowling ball impacts scattered everywhere. He lined up and took a very professional-looking approach. 1, 2, and 3 steps. He slid forward slightly, but was careful not to cross the dirt-covered black line. As he released the ball with a flourish and it rolled loudly down the lane, spinning left toward the computer monitor. The glass exploded into the air and went everywhere as the bowling ball impacted the computer monitor with a loud, echoing crash. Strike! Hey, nice one. Heck yeah, man, you try, it's pretty fun. I approached the line in a similar fashion, and was about to release the bowling ball when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. There was a person watching us from the shadows at the end of the lanes. I saw them for just a second as I released the ball. The distraction was enough to throw off my release and the ball stuck on my thumb. It went flying up into the air, landing with a heavy crack in the lane. Whoa, easy man, what the heck are you doing? There was somebody over there behind that door. I barely recognized my own voice, sounding shaky and frightened despite my best efforts. The figure was gone now and the hidden door was closed once again. What are you talking about? I don't see anybody. That panel opened up like a door, didn't you see it? There was a guy looking at us from behind it. Come on, let's go call the cops or something. He looked at me disbelievingly. It was probably just your imagination, but like I said, we do get the odd person wandering in here. Let's go check for ourselves. If there's somebody hiding back there, we can just tell them that they have to leave. And what if they don't want to go? Oh, come on, you're such a wuss. There's 2 of us and 1 of him. He started walking down the lane towards the camouflaged door at the end. I guessed that it was where the bowling alley workers would go through to get behind the pins and fix problems if needed. There was probably a squatter back there by the looks of it. We had likely woken him up with our loud ruckus. I showed Noel the panel, and sure enough, there was a hidden latch that I managed to find with my fingers after a few moments of searching. We opened it and I allowed Noel to go first. This was his idea after all, as we went into the hidden maintenance area. There was a very narrow corridor perpendicular to the lanes with access to all of the pins. It was dark and I couldn't see anyone hiding. Not that there was anywhere to hide, I realized. The space was very minimal. And then I noticed another door. It was narrow and short with a doorknob that was much lower than typically seen, right around my knees. One would have to duck to go through it as well, since the top of the door was only about 4 feet off the ground. Weird, I said, walking over to it, but I felt strangely drawn towards it. I decided for some reason that I really needed to know what was behind that odd white door. Opening it up, I found another staircase, very narrow and steep, leading down a long, long ways. What's up with this place? Man, this is so messed up, Noel said. He pushed past me and ducked as if he were about to go through the strange, undersized door and down the stairs. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my rational mind was screaming at him to stop, and yet another more overwhelming voice was overriding that one, and telling me to go down there with him, to see and explore the depths underneath this place. Noel's foot hovered over the edge and he was about to take a step down, but then he stopped. What? Do you feel it too? Feel what? Like you have to go down there. I almost feel like I can't stop myself right now. Why do I want to go down there so badly? Yeah, I feel it too. Maybe we should go back. This is really weird. It was a struggle to get out the words and to turn around. It was even more difficult, but I managed to do it. When I spun around, I saw a short, squat figure standing behind me in the dark corridor. He had pointed ears and was smiling at me with a mouth full of many sharp little teeth. He was dressed in black and wore a hood. His lips and the lower half of his face was that of a man with a beard, but the top half of his face revealed that to only be a mask. That part of the facade was missing, like a Phantom of the Opera mask in relief. From the cheekbones and nose up, there was nothing human. Giant blue and pink worms made up the rest of the humanoid creature's face. They squirmed and wriggled around his huge mosquito eyes and in and out of his skeletal and fleshless nose. Looking at him was like laying eyes on a nightmare while awake. It was unsettling and wrong, and it felt awful and it hurt my mind, causing a break there. It felt as if everything I thought I knew about the world, about life, and about the universe, it was all wrong. Like everything had been turned upside down. As I gasped in horror and staggered backwards away from him unthinkingly, I bumped into Noel. He tumbled off balance from the ledge and down the staircase. He grabbed onto me, desperate not to fall. Instead of saving him, though, I fell along with him. Each time I felt the impact of the stone staircase against my body, I wondered if a bone was shattered or broken. Such was the extraordinary pain that accompanied it. When we finally hit the bottom, I was hurting everywhere, worse than I ever had before. Looking up, I felt dizzy, and I saw the hooded figure far up above. He was a tiny silhouette in the distance. My head was going round in circles and the light of the flashlight began to flicker. And that was when the door closed and I heard it click shut and then lock, the sound echoing down to us. We were imprisoned in the darkness below them all. I could see stone walls all around us, making a corridor that led a long distance in both ways. The place looked ancient but well preserved. Noel. He was lying unconscious next to me on the stone floor of the sub-basement, where we were now trapped. The last thing I saw was that he was still breathing, and then the light flickered once more and stayed off completely. I was left in total darkness. Lifting up my hand in front of my face, I couldn't see an inch away from my eyes. There was complete silence all around me. Until the sound of movement approaching. Not footsteps, but the slithering slide across stone that accompanies a serpent. And that was when I felt cool, firm scales grasping my ankle. Whatever it was wrapped around my leg, and I was too dizzy and hurt to scream. The world went from shadowy blackness to nothingness as I slipped into the nightmare realm of unconsciousness. When I awoke, everything was bathed in an eerie blue light. I saw that Noel was lying next to me, staring and looking like he was about to wake up as well. We were in a huge underground chamber with tall, vaulted stone ceilings high above us. The place appeared ancient. I saw strange hieroglyphics on the walls and the towering arches. A massive pool of water was right in front of us, and I saw that there was the blue light emanating from it. Deep within that body of water, the light shone up from the bottom. Noel opened his eyes, and I was examining our surroundings. He sat up slowly and looked at me in disbelief. "What happened? Where are we?" And then everything came back to me. The man with the giant worms crawling in his face, falling down the stairs, and the sound of snakes coming towards us. The thing grabbing my ankle had apparently brought us both here. I brought Noel up to speed. "Oh man, what the? Are you serious right now?" "Unfortunately, yeah. Let's get out of here. I don't like this place one bit." We began to rise groggily to our feet when the ground started to shake. The stone floor around us began to crack and heave and sway. I looked down and saw the ground beneath our feet was covered in ornate, finely carved symbols and hieroglyphics. One of them in particular caught my eye. It showed a pair of men beside a large pool of water. The next image showed tentacles emerging from the pool. The next panel showed a huge squid-like beast rising from the water. The men were ensnared by the great monster, and then finally, they were consumed by it in the last image. Okay, yeah, let's really get out of here. I managed to get to my feet despite the shaking ground, and I avoided falling down a spreading gap created as a crack on the stone floor began to spread. We tried to run, but we were thrown to the side and fell, off balance to the floor again. Something grabbed Noel. A tentacle from the water lashed out at him and wrapped around his ankle like a lasso in an instant. He screamed as it dragged him to the edge of the water. I reached out to grab him in an instant, too late, and I watched as his fingernails dug into the stone floor, snapping and breaking off as his shrill cries of terror echoed in the chamber. His broken fingernails left white marks on the hieroglyphics, and I watched in horror as he disappeared off the edge into the water, his face a frozen scream. I heard the sound of crashing waves and saw a form beginning to emerge from the blue-lit waters. Rising from the giant pool was a behemoth unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a monstrous squid with hundreds of tentacles, various lengths and diameters that squirmed and slapped angrily at the water. One of them had Noel in its grasp, and I saw that he was gasping for air, still screaming as the thing dropped him toward its giant, gaping maw. He fell, his legs kicking and arms flailing as he dropped down towards the pit of its mouth and disappeared. His screams were cut off instantly, and I realized that I had just watched my only brother die. Unable to even comprehend the horror of what I had just witnessed, my eyes continued to follow it as the monster rose to even more impossible heights. Its face had a dozen red searching eyes, and it rose up higher than I thought possible, almost touching the distant stone ceiling above me. Noel! I was in shock, unable to move, and perhaps that aided me. I wondered later if the creature's vision was limited to movement, because the second that I turned and began to run, the beast spotted me instantly. I heard the sound of tentacles slithering towards me like giant pythons, and I raced towards the door leading out of the chamber. There appeared to be a torch hanging from the wall, and I grabbed it and dashed out into the adjacent corridor. It didn't occur to me at that moment to wonder who had lit the torch, but I would soon find out. My feet slapped against the damp stone floor as I raced down the hall and away from the creature. I had no idea where I was running to, only that I had to escape that place. As I neared an intersecting hallway, I heard the low rumbling sound of chanting voices. The flickering shine of a candle against the wall signified someone's approach. Skidding to a stop, I halted just in time, as I saw a procession of hooded figures pass through just ahead. They did not even glance at me, just continued their march. Each of them held a torch, and I saw they looked just like the man from the bowling alley. The top halves of their faces were consumed by giant worms. The bottom half were that of men's faces with long flowing beards. I covered the flame of the torch as best as I could with the large security jacket that Noelle had given me, turning away from them. I guessed that they didn't see me in the shadows, and continued to stay quiet until their low rumbling chants were no longer audible. Once I was sure that they were gone, I ran down the way they had come from, thinking that it might lead me out. And either way, I wanted to get as far from them as possible, so I went the opposite direction that they were going. I turned right down another corridor, and after running that way for a long while, I chanced upon the staircase that we had fallen down. Running up the steps as quickly as I could, and I found the door was still locked at the top. There was no other choice but to try to break it down. With no real space in the top stair to take a running start, it was difficult to knock the door down, but I tried. I rammed into it with my shoulder again and again until it hurt like crazy, and then I switched to the other side. Nothing that I did made any difference. The door was solid. I screamed and banged on it with my fist desperately, hoping someone would hear and come let me out. Panicked thoughts were running through my brain, and all I knew was that I had to get out of there in that moment. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I was covered in sweat, shaking and terrified, hammering on the door over and over again. And then the sound of low, rumbling chants came from the bottom of the stairs, and I saw flickering candlelight coming from down the hallway, drawing nearer. My cries for help rose in pitch and volume as I banged on the door once more, jiggling the handle and doing anything I could to get it open. I then heard the sound of a key turning in the lock, and it opened, revealing a tall man wearing a security guard's uniform. "Who the heck are you?" he asked. Pushing past him, I ran out of there and made my way out into the darkened bowling alley where he caught up with me. He grabbed my arm and stopped me. Wrenching it away from him, I began to scream again, hysterical. "We need to get out of here. Worm people, squid monster, they got Noelle." The man in the security uniform looked at me incredulously. "For Pete's sake, man, Noelle's getting high during work again, isn't he? What are you guys doing, tripping on mushrooms or something? And what the heck are you talking about? Worm people and squid monsters, really?" I saw that his jacket said supervisor on it. Despite my immediate loathing for the man, I was happy that he was there. At least he had opened the door with his Grand Master key, allowing me to escape. "I'm Noelle's brother, and I was giving him some much-needed backup down there. You guys made him patrol this place alone, and now he's dead because of it. There is a murderous secret society living beneath us in an underground temple right now. They sacrifice people to a giant squid monster." He gave me that look again. "Yeah, okay, so not mushrooms then. You on LSD, ayahuasca, what kind of weird stuff are you kids into these days? Either way, tell Noelle when you see him that he's fired." The guy let me go, and I ran out of there as fast as I could, screaming in grief and frustration, threatening to sue and to call the cops. But instead, I got back in my car and I drove home. I mean, obviously I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, trying to figure out what I would tell my parents. When the sun rose, I would have to explain to them that their eldest son was dead, killed by a giant carnivorous squid monster. They wouldn't take that well. Hours passed, and finally the sun came up. After I heard my folks had been up for a little while, I went out to the living room to tell them what had happened, or at least a version of it that they would be able to accept. What that was, I still didn't know. They said good morning and then saw my face and looked at me with worried eyes. I opened my mouth to tell them what had happened, but then the front door opened up. It was Noel returning from his night shift. He came in the front door looking fresh, despite what had happened. He was unscathed and didn't have a scratch on him. His fingernails were shiny and clean and healthy looking, despite the fact that I had seen them break off as he was dragged across the stone floor of the sacrificial chamber. And that was when I knew that it was not my brother. The worms beneath his skin squirmed and wriggled for just a moment, as if hearing my mind's protests, deforming his facial features. And then it smoothed out and became plain again. Noel came up the stairs and smiled, looking at me. "Hey, morning, little bro. Gotta say I'm surprised to see you awake so early. You had a late night after all." Speechless, I stared at him with my jaw hanging down. "Early bird catches the worm," my mom said cheerfully. "Now who wants breakfast?"